promise you, you don't wanna be me. It's okay to be you. You just gotta believe in yourself, in yourself, in yourself. All me, you can be you, and I can be me. I promise you, you don't wanna be me. It's okay to be you. You just gotta believe in yourself, in
Shayna,
yourself, in
Shayna,
yourself.
Shayna. Look at that shirt. Hope.
Absolutely, because we're all about hope, right? We have to give the hope because we've been through all of the mess, all the trials and the tribulations that the world could throw at us, and we came out on the other side. So, of course, we have to go back and help those who have just forgotten how to have hope in their own lives.
Yeah, that is true.
Hmm.
We got to make it do what it do.
Yes, absolutely. We have to be the examples, right?
Absolutely. We got to remain in alignment with our assignments.
Hmm. Even on those days when we feel like we just want to throw in the towel, because I know I have some of those days sometimes, but when you look at the bigger purpose, you can't, right? Because when we give up on ourselves and we give up on our communities, or that's what I believe. And so I can't ever give up. This isn't something that I wanted to just do, right, for a season, right? Like, this is what I'm going to do for the rest of my life, is what I've decided. And so just trying to be the best person and the best version that I can always be, right? To never be better than anybody else but myself yesterday.
I mean, at the end of the day, that's what it's about. It's about being in alignment with your assignment, finding your purpose, and then aligning your actions to walk in the path of whatever your purpose is. I believe that we are all born with a purpose, and I also believe that uh, part of our original purpose is to discover that purpose and then walk in alignment with it.
That's
And
beautiful. Yes.
when you're able to do that, it's like, you know, it doesn't feel like life is so lifey.
No, it makes it a little bit more enjoyable. You don't feel like you're working when you're in alignment with your assignment.
Exactly. Makes life more adventurous, and the way to view it is different. Like my worldview about, complications or struggles, barriers, setbacks, it's it's more fun. It's like I'm playing a video game. When you play a video game for the first time, you do what you got to do to get through each level, but you never necessarily know what's coming up, right? You
Right.
see what's in front of you, you're aware, you're present, and you kind of handle what's in front of you. And those are interesting challenges that create upgrades and growth in yourself if you view it that way. If you view it as like this thing is happening to you, against you, then you're going to be in conflict with life itself. And I used
Mhm.
to hear in, recovery rooms and recovery circles all the time. I used to hear things like, live life on life's terms, one day at a time. And I'm like, man, it always was just like slogans.
Mhm.
But as I started stepping into the work that I'm doing, those sayings kept resurfacing. And I'm like, oh, now I get it, right? One day at a time. Like all we have is the present. And that makes sense. Do what you can today, not, yesterday's graveyard food and tomorrow's not promised.
Yeah, I know. I believe that, but I also believe too that we have to plan for the future too, right? Like, we have to make a path to get there and to have um, our big goals, our little goals, everything in between. It's a great theory to think, or I believe it's a great theory to think, oh, one day at a time with no plan. Okay, well then where am I going with no plan? Nowhere, right? And so it's great to have that mentality, right? One day at a time when you have a plan, right? And you've already mapped it out to a degree, right? Like, we have this ideal that we're going to start at one place and then end at another place. And then there's a straight line to it. That's never the case. I think I know that, you know that, anybody else knows that too, right? It's the journey. And I'm just realizing that, in just the recent years, I'm always I just want to get to the end goal. I just want to get over here, not realizing it's all the trials and the tribulations that go into it to get to that finish point that you have to learn and endure to be able to hold that assignment when you get to the finish line or to where you want to go.
No, it's true. And even the Pursue It 365 philosophy that I, founded a whole nonprofit on is based around that very concept of take one step a day in the direction of whom you want to become. And that could be an email today. It could be reading a particular book tomorrow. It could, if it's one thing that's in the direction of where you want to go, I'm all for setting goals and this and that, but what I'm not for is fixed outcomes in your goal setting. I believe we should set open-ended outcome goals where the goal is, and you set it, the goal is the journey, right? So it's like,
Mhm.
okay, and I can give you an example. You take someone who says, in 5 years exactly, I'm going to purchase a house, right?
Right.
That's their goal. So in 5 years, that's 60 months. Their metric of success, that they're most likely going to, take on the identity of, because the thing about fixed outcome goals that you believe in,
Mm,
right, is when you set them, imagine if the outcome was income and you took out an advance, right?
mm,
And so you already are acting like in 60 months you're going to have a house, right? And there's a lot of people who believe that that's how you manifest. You think of the big phenom, I don't know, 20 years ago, The Secret. Remember that book?
yeah, I
Rhonda
do.
Burns,
Yeah.
right? Talk about just imagine the amount of whatever you want as if and start planning and da da da. And I get that. And the manifestation philosophy has worked. What I'm talking about is in that 60 months, what happens in month 50, and you come to the realization you're not yet even 70% of the way there, and you only have 20% of your time left to
Hmm.
get there. Now you're going to be feeling guilty and shameful, and you're going to be making decisions based on the pressure that you put on yourself because at the end of this 60 months, you're either successful or a failure and a goal that you fixed, right? Versus an open-ended outcome where you say, okay, I'm going to put all my energy into saving to buy a house. And so when that 60-month mark comes, you can essentially assess the data that you have. Like, okay, I've tried this for 5 years. Let's see where I'm at. Contact the person, the mortgage broker, start getting the advice and say, hey, here's my credit. Here's how much I've saved. How close am I? Now, at that point, now you have either you're moving into looking for a house because you did everything that you needed to do and you've accomplished it, or you're given data that says, hey, you're about 30% more. Here's a couple things you need to do on your credit. And then you're not feeling so dejected and like a failure at that point because you can say, okay, after 5 years, I got 75% of the way there. Now you can be strength based because instead of considering that 5 years a failure because you didn't meet that 60-month mark, you
Right.
actually you actually add all the achievements of that 5 years, which gives you momentum for the next maybe only two to get
Mhm.
to buying the house. You make those adjustments. So I do believe that there's nuances to just setting goals and having specific outcomes attached to them because then we incarcerate ourselves to those outcomes and the result because sometimes be catastrophic. You could be completely depressed because you didn't meet that goal if you really really believed it and you put that number on it and you didn't account for any lifey things happening along the way. You just thought
Right.
in 60 months this is it, and if I don't do this then I'm not,
Right.
whatever it is, that you put on yourself. But I think it's important to set goals, to be realistic about them, and
Mhm.
also to just pursue them. Just keep going after it. Do what you got to do. I have a piece of paper, that tells me my hourly, learning topics, right? So Monday through Sunday, it's 60 minutes set aside, and each day has a particular topic. So I'm either listening to a podcast about science or I'm doing research on RCWs. But my 7 days of knowledge is only related to the work I do. I'm not going to go down a rabbit hole of how to build a car for no reason if I'm not, pouring my energy. That's not a
Mhm.
hobby of mine. That's not something I need to know. I'm going to be learning things that are in alignment with my assignment, with what I'm doing. You know what I mean? So if it's peer support laws in different states, if it's national, new practices, staying up to date on like the new practices, new language in our field, because it changes all the time, like what's acceptable, what's not, what people have decided is offensive in the field now. Like we got to be constantly up to date on those things, or people will try to cancel you because you didn't know a term was outdated or criminalized all of a sudden.
Right, exactly. Maybe I should have expanded my answer on that a little bit, right? That it's just like you said, right? It's really good to have those goals, but it's also good to plan for, or I know with me and my schedule, I always planned for error, right? So I always have that extra time. So if something falls short or something doesn't go right, I always allow myself that time to have a little mess up or to have a little bit of wiggle room. And let's say I get through my day and I have all that extra time at the end of the day, then that's extra time that I get to spend with myself. Right. And so making those goals, but planning for, like you said, for the emergencies, for the things that you don't really see coming or that you can't predict, that just life happens. And so those things happen. And so I think that when you do plan, or when I plan my life, right, I always think about I may not get exactly what I want, right? But that's not always what it is, right? It's about learning. It's about being in those spaces. It's about being in around those people that are in alignment for your assignment. And you
And
don't
some,
have, and sometimes you don't learn everything that you need to on the first try, right? That's called learning, right? That's how we learn things, is by failure. And I think that maybe we need to change that narrative of that word, right? Failure, and take that out of the vocabulary and just say, that was a learning experience. That was a positive, and this is what I got out of it. This was a silver lining, because there's always a silver lining in any situation. Sometimes you got to
well, look
dig
at it like
deep.
this. If you try something and you fail at it, you actually succeed in gathering data because
Absolutely.
failure is an opportunity to gather data. How many people in our history are known for astronomical inventions, but they had 1,000 failures before they got there, or 100 or 500 or whatever the case may be, right? Failure is needed to have something to metric success against.
Correct.
Right. We need to have adversity. Otherwise, people will have less incentive to be grateful for things. Right. We talk about resilience a lot in our work and in our field, but resilience is a past tense inquiry, right? Because when you're talking about resilience, it's the ability to, bounce back from adversity. Typically, when people are talking about being resilient, it's about something that they already have the data from. They already have the receipts that they survived the thing that made them say, hey, I was pretty resilient of me, right? It's a past tense inquiry, though. So another thing you said, is the preparation piece is, you might not get everything you want, but you also might get what you want at the wrong time. And I say that to say, so I'm a, healthcare authority peer trainer. And one of my favorite modules to train is when we start talking about self-advocacy, for example, right? And there's a steps and there's a process. And the process is, see if I can remember off the top of my head, but the first step is name the need for advocacy. And this is like if I'm working with you, you would first have to identify to me, the peer, that there's a need that you have to advocate for a particular thing. Then the next step would be do the research. I think three is identify gatekeepers, right? Who is the person that can, answer your first questions? Is it the receptionist? What person do we need to email, contact? Where do we need to go to, like, who's receiving the first stage of this advocacy complaint, if you will, right? So the gatekeeper. And then it's make a plan, and then it's practice. So do some real plays, some role plays about it. And then it's kind of like repeat if that first gatekeeper gives you barriers, and then you kind of start back at the top, right? Now, I said all that to say when I train this, I add a couple of things. One, um, preparation for the yes and the no. Because in my line of work, I have seen where people have come and say, hey, and the example I use is somebody wanting a bed date for a treatment center. And in their lived experience and in their, experience up to that point, they have a very particular mindset about when that can happen from the point of asking. And a lot of times, people will send, some people call them clients or peers, participants, and they would say, hey, call this number every day in the morning until there's a bed open. And, so they send them away. So when someone walks in, they might initially be thinking, hey, I really need to advocate to get into detox like ASAP. But that ASAP, they don't plan for the yes right now. And I've seen it happen where I'm like, okay, I make a phone call, I do a warm handoff, and I'm like, hey, 30 minutes, do you got a ride? Bed's open, and they're not ready to go.
Right. I've
So,
seen it happen
so,
a lot of times. Yeah.
I really believe that when we talk about, goal setting and gearing up for a fight, you also have to consider no fight.
Hmm.
Because a lot of times they come in thinking, okay, I probably got 3 or 4 days of getting my stuff together, maybe putting stuff in storage, arranging things. I'm going to ask this behavioral health person today, and they'll probably tell me to come back. This is what they're thinking going in. They're not prepared for someone to be like, we got a bed right now, and
Right.
you got to take it right now, or it won't be available. They're not ready. They're not, and that goes in all kinds of other things that we gear up for. We think we're gonna, go to court against something, and we're gonna start planning our lives around this long battle and how much it's gonna cost and how hard it's gonna be. And then we just get the thing that we ask for right away. A lot of times we aren't ready for the next steps, right? I want the job. I want the job. I need any job. I'm gonna do 100,000, you know, uh, applications, and I'm gonna put myself out there and this and that. And then someone calls them like, hey, you got the job. And then they end up not having that same job a couple of months later because they weren't prepared to work.
Right.
They weren't prepared for the yes. They were actually relying on the fact that they probably won't get a job right away. And so they have some time to kind of, you know,
Figure it out. Right.
figure it out and get their mind wrapped around what having a job and being on a schedule and all these things actually looks like in practice versus I just want the thing, I just want the thing. Sometimes, setting a goal with an outcome, getting that outcome right away can be harmful. They're not ready.
Right. Right, but who determines that though? Like who's ready and who's really not, because I've seen in both times too, you know what I mean? Like when somebody goes for that job, right, or that opportunity, and then they've prepared so much that they're overqualified now.
Yeah. Well, the outcome determines. So
Right.
it's to me, in my opinion, it's nearly an impossibility to determine if somebody's ready or not before they go into a thing they've never done. So you take someone who's been, and we could just use me, for example, right? 12 years old, I got incarcerated, in and out, cycled through the system for the next 28 years, right? Now, on this last time that I was released for the last time, I had made similar statements and even felt them in every other time I had got out, right? So who was to say if I was ready to do what I'm doing now this time? Only the outcome determined if I was ready or not.
Hmm.
And, so we can't really go in judging people or making a predetermination on if they're ready or not because we don't know and they don't know. But the
Right.
point is to not set themselves up for failure by not being prepared for both outcomes.
Correct. I agree
You
with that.
know, be
Yeah.
prepared for getting the job, be prepared for not getting the job, be prepared for them saying, "Hey, you start tomorrow." What does that look like?
Right.
So when we're even supporting people, having these realistic in practice conversations, if you think about something enough, right, you can manifest different things because now you've played out these different versions of these different outcomes. You played the movie through on many different scenarios. When that scenario presents itself, you have at least one time in the past thought about how you were going to respond to that situation and maybe even created some subconscious preparation even if you didn't believe it, even if you have that learned helplessness where you're like, yeah, but I'm not going to get the job the first time I put in one. But what happens when the first application you put in, they say, yes, you're hired? Are you ready to go to work? That's a more important question to me than giving somebody a job who just needs one.
Right. Right. I think that's just figuring out though, like what the person really needs and like what they really want, right? And helping them just decipher that and kind of like figuring out what that path really looks like, right? Like somebody can say, "Oh, I need a job." And that means like I need a job right now to pay these bills. Does it mean that, "Oh, I want this job that I'm planning for," right? And sometimes I know I hear that, "Oh, I need a job," and so I'm thinking, okay, well, what do you want to do? And I'm thinking big, right? Because that's where my brain goes. Instead of, okay, well, there's steps to get there. When I'm advocating for somebody else or even myself sometimes, right?
Yeah.
Just to tell myself, hey, you got to cool it down real quick. You ain't getting over here, you know what I mean, without this. Like you got to look at all the qualifications, all the things that are needed to get over here, right? Sometimes they can substitute stuff for lived experience and things like that, but for the most part, like you got to be ready for the job that you're asking for. And so I think it's just, reeling in those questions, right? And seeing exactly what somebody means. Like I could say, one thing and you could say the exact same thing and they could have two totally different meanings depending on where we're coming from. And so on that note, I think it's just listening in, right? It's that leaning into somebody and really understanding what they're saying, right? Speak their language is what I've learned to do, right? It's not always about how I communicate, how I talk. It's how somebody else communicates and having to stop for that second and to go into active listening instead of just listening to respond, which I think a lot of people do. And so, yeah, I think it's just about really listening to the person that you're helping or even yourself and just determining where you want to go and like where you're qualified to go. And if you're not qualified, then there's resources out there. Ask for help, right? Figure out that plan. So it doesn't mean no right now. It just means no at the moment. I mean, I even learned that, going back to when I ran for city council, right? Like I was doing that to get my feet wet, just to learn the process, to be in the process, to learn the process. Because a lot of times people don't tell you all the ins and out, all the details, you know, that
Yeah,
you have.
some of it you got to learn from experience. Some of it you got to just do.
Right.
And one thing that now I kind of just process everything you said previously, what comes to mind right now is asking somebody even before all of that technical stuff, right? Even before the credentials, the qualifications, the passion, what do you have the bandwidth for right now? What do you have the capacity to commit to? Can you commit to 40 hours? It doesn't matter what the job is. Are you mentally prepared to commit to 40 hours of your week if for the last however many years you have been out of work or incarcerated or in and out of addiction and stuff like that? So you're coming into this life, a civilian life, working a 40 hour 40 40 hour a week job. In my opinion, it's a marathon. And you think of it like a track, right? You don't take somebody to a track meet that's never trained the whole season to run. And so how are you gonna determine, like, they're gonna get cramps, they're gonna fall out, they might pass out, they might not know how to breathe correctly. Like these are the things that I think we miss. And this is why my focus is on, emotional quotient development and social norm development, even before having the job conversation. And the reason I say that is because there's a lot of things that are overlooked. If I'm supporting somebody who has a gap in work history, regardless of what the reasons are, a decade gap, that's you've developed a little, even if you worked prior to that gap, right? That 10 years might create atrophy in your working muscles, right? Your ability to be somewhere on time every day, 5 days a week, no matter what, right? That practice has to be kind of, I think, gradually introduced into someone's life again. And that might not be everybody. Some people might be able to just boom, get back to it and just thrive in that. But I think finding out is worth exploration, finding out what they believe their capacity and bandwidth is to work a job, any job, full time, part time. So, finding out that part, I think, is super important to sustaining somebody's successful entry and integration, whether it's from addiction, psychiatric hospitals, even like in the new modules in our 80 hour, even military to civilian life. It's a completely different life now. They have to relearn the social norms and they're catching up. If you've been separated for, just think about the last 10 years. Think
Mm,
about our societal changes, norms, what's offensive publicly and what's not, things that are considered weird. One of my big ones when I came home was pulling up on people's houses without calling and text. When I left the streets, that's how you hung out with your friends. You showed up at their house, you walked in. Nowadays, you pull up on somebody's house, there's going to be like some weird looks. They're going to think there's an emergency. Oh, this guy's weird. He's evasive. You know what I'm saying? Like he just
Right.
pops
No, I
up,
get it. Yeah.
and now you're shamed and stigmatized over something that you just didn't know.
Right. Right. But I mean, is that really the person's fault, or is that the community's fault for not having some, I don't know, empathy just for people, right? And looking at maybe where somebody else came, instead of sitting there looking at somebody and being like, okay, well, this is their norms, well, why are they this way? Why don't more people stop and think that, like, okay, well, what happened to make them this way? So instead of shaming them, let's lean in and find out why they're this way, or why do they think that this norm for them is appropriate, but it's really not normal in society. Why don't we sit down with this person and have a conversation? Because I believe that that's what it's all about. It's about educating somebody, right? Like you had said, you had just, your norm was, oh, I'm just going to pull up to my friends. Everything is okay, right? You get incarcerated, you come out and you do that same thing. And then people are like, hey, wait a minute. That's, and then look at you some kind of way. Is that really people you want to hang out with versus some people who would be like, hey, I just wanted to let you know, like, in society, that's really not acceptable. That may have been acceptable in the past, but I just kind of wanted to give you a little bit of information. So then when you go and meet other people, you won't have this same reaction, right? And so unless we grab somebody by the hand and explain to them why something isn't appropriate, why you get the weird looks, why this happens, then you can't really change. And you can't, I believe, you can't really shame somebody for things or norms that they don't even understand that are happening when they have been out of the social world for a moment. We need to have more grace and explain these things so then people understand, and they're more apt to come and to join in society the way that society has deemed appropriate, right? Instead
Yeah.
of, because I've gotten that too, those looks, or because I'm that person too, right? I'm not going to call them, it's going to pop up, right? Hey, and I know that that's not all right, and so it took me a while too to be like, hey, I got to call,
But
but I had to have somebody tell me that, like, hey, Shayna, that's not okay, that's not how we do this, you
by
know
whose authority? You see,
society.
okay, but you see what I'm saying? So it's
No,
like
I get it. Yeah.
when you're, it begs the question, why is it not okay when it
Mm,
was? And that's a bigger question, right? Because now we're talking about the social constructs of social media being more acceptable to comment, meet people, poke your nose in other people's business, but yet it's a societal affront, I guess, if you pull up on your friend's house unannounced. To me, it's backwards, and I don't agree with it. So, by whose authority? Like who are you to shame me for something that I know is not morally wrong?
right.
I don't think it's morally wrong to go to your friend's house. Whether, if that's your friend or your family member, like the same thing happens with siblings. My siblings, it's different. I can pull up at my mom's house. I have a key. I can show up at my brother's. At best, I might be already on the street and be like, "You home?" And if he says, "Yeah, all right, I'm pulling up," But again, there's other people in society that I would consider friends that I know they would feel a certain type of way if I just pull in their driveway and knocked on the door, right? But it's not. I don't not do it because I think it's wrong.
Mm,
I don't do it because they will be offended by it, or they will think, it's awkward, it's uncomfortable for them. So I don't try to purposefully put people in uncomfortable situations, but I moved away from feeling any type of way towards me about other people's reactions. Because like I said, that's a personal example. So it's a real one. I originally would be like it made me feel a certain type of way, like negative, like, damn, am I weird? Like prison like messed me up that much? Like, what's going on out here? But then I start thinking like, nah, that ain't weird. Society's weird now. You know what I'm saying? Like, what do you
Right.
mean? Why you guys, what happened? Everybody wants to be isolated and cut off from everybody, but we always hear these sayings like the opposite of addiction is connection and things like that, right?
Mhm.
And we hear these things about, community, community, community. We got community organizations that don't collaborate with other community organizations. Who's losing in those refusals to collaborate? The community
The
that
community.
you say you're in a nonprofit space to support and serve in service of, right? It means doing the best you can with all the resources available because who benefits is the people you're in service to. Um,
Absolutely.
and that's just kind of my worldview on this kind of work, this community work. When you and I have this similar philosophy of there is no community without collaboration. It's an impossibility. So the people that are like in competition with other organizations and other people with lived experience will be the ones that are actually the gatekeepers to the newer people coming out and trying to change their life around and get into the space. It'd be the people who did it before them, keeping them from doing it. And it's mind blowing to me. It's backwards. Those are the people that should be having those conversations with them that we were just talking about. Like, hey, um, what do you know? What do you don't know? Like, I know this might seem like a weird question, but you've
Right.
been gone for a while. What are some things like if you were going to a new country, you would do it? You would
Right.
get with a guide or you would ask your people like, hey, what are some things I should do to not offend? And, what are some customs so that I can be, enter this space in a good way. So you have to think of somebody who's been gone for 10 years, whether it's in their head because they were struggling with, mental health or substance use, or they were physically gone in a prison or a psychiatric hospital. When they're coming back, they're kind of coming back to a new culture. So they have to be reintroduced to the norms that will keep them from having these little internal hangups and conflicts with people because the work that I'm in, the work that you're in, and just the overall behavioral health field, it's a very small percent. We're the ones that go to the trainings to ask the questions that I'm talking about, right? But the general public doesn't go to these trainings and they can't be considered at fault for responding to things that they have not been trained to see it another way, right? They're not necessarily considered required to endeavor to see the worldviews of everyone they come into contact with, right? As
Right.
professionals, as peers and recovery coaches, therapists, that's our job is to get curious, to lean in every conversation with curiosity. You know, curiosity should not be just a thing you use as a tool. I believe you should endeavor to become a curious person if you step into the field of, heart work, of service, of social work, of supporting people, advocating for people, because the more curious you are, the more information you can get so that you could treat them the way they want to be treated, which is the platinum rule. Treating people according to the way they want to be treated. The golden rule is treating people how you want to be treated. We need to move into that evolved space of after I get enough data, then I can really get a picture of who the person is before me and support them with any resources or information I have that is in alignment with what they want and need, not what I want for them. So I
Right.
take that completely out of that goes on the shelf. Whatever I want goes on the shelf, doesn't matter, right? What I need to do is focus on the engagement in front of me and gathering as much data as I can and really listening, like you said, and active listening and hearing this person out and asking the right questions so that whatever gaps they have to being able to integrate and recover and be in recovery and eventually work myself out of a job where they're off doing their own thing, whether it's, working at a car lot, whatever it is, they're able to do it in a successful way because the tools that they were able to take with them, right? Always
Right.
with them in the driver's seat, always with them being able to make the important decisions on their life, reclaiming their autonomy, because a lot of times we have given up our authority to others, to constructs, We give up our authority to society. We give up our authority to friend groups. We give up our authority to TikTok trends, right? So, oh, well, that's what it
Right.
is because that's what's being told to me. But we fail sometimes to just use our own discernment and decide for ourselves is just because society says so doesn't make it morally right and it doesn't feel good to me. So I'm going to go ahead and that right there is difficult and requires courage. There's studies that have been done where people would select an incorrect answer 75% of the time, at least once in this particular study. And I talk about it in By Whose Authority, the book, right? But this study was really unique when I was talking about herd mentality, is people will literally double down on something wrong because it means they're with the group, then select the right answer if it puts them on the outside of the group. And they will do that knowingly. So people will know something's wrong, but because there's 100 people who agree with it, they will go to the 100 rather than stand with the three or four, because it
That's,
requires courage to be different. It requires
mhm.
courage to stand on your own belief system. It requires courage to have people, hating on you in rooms you're not in, and you finding out and all these different things, and still moving in your alignment and with your assignment and in your value system, and not letting any of those things affect the way you interact with people or you do the work. That takes courage. And some of that courage comes from training and skills that give me the confidence to say, you know what, not taking that personal, doesn't matter. I know I'm in integrity. I know where I'm going and I know what compass drives me. My compass essentially is the same compass that's written into the creed of behavioral health work, which is do no harm, right? I did a
Right.
lot of harm growing up. I'm not doing any more harm, period. And as a professional, that's not only the compass, but that's the embodiment of what drives my work is preservation of life, quality of human life, quality of generational wealth, not just the USD, but real generational wealth where your kids are teaching their kids emotional regulation at an early age. To me, there's more value in that than if I create a multi-million-dollar franchise and then just keep passing on the generations, but everybody's unhealed and still unwilling to unpack or go to therapy or talk about their emotions. No, I would rather the wealth of emotional intelligence and emotional quotient development in my family that spreads out into my community. One of the most proudest dad moments I think I could speak to is when I published How to Train Your Lizard, Anger and Aggression Management, and I had got my first author's copy. I had like two of them, and right around that time, my daughter had tried me and her mom, and she went and did something that, well, basically, she pierced her nose right after she asked us and we said no. And she did at school and came home with it pierced. And, parents, I'm going to be livid, right? And I was
Right.
really upset and, got to taking things for an extended amount of time. And then I thought about it. You like, you know what? And then first thing I did was I got really curious about why she made the decision. And so I did. I created a space where I'm talking to her and really just like so, and it boiled down to it was like multiple different things. And ultimately it was three other little girls, peer pressure, right? That had did it on their own with the little gun or whatever, the handheld thing you can just pierce. And so she was trying to fit in, even though she knew it was wrong. The herd mentality in that scenario was stronger than her disciplinary or potential consequences from her own parents, right? And then so I said, you know what? If you're willing to do this book, it's 22 chapters, it's a workbook, it's all about emotional intelligence and all these different things, emotional regulation and all of that. I was like, when you finish the book, because there's exercises and there's homework that would require her to at least work on it for a week minimum. And she did that. It was about 8 days. She did all the exercises, all the things. I checked all her homework. And fast forward, like maybe a weekend later, she had a friend over, and I walked by her room, and she was teaching her how to train her lizard and the concept. And the book was in my office. She had turned it in. So she was doing it from memory. And to me, I say that's one of my proudest dad moments since I've been home, because that's exactly the value of what I'm talking about with the work we do, right? If nobody else, my daughter affected somebody else's daughter with positive emotional intelligence development at a sleepover, right? because
Yeah.
of that intentionality. And so I would have never expected, that wasn't in my intended outcome when I said, hey, just do this book,
Mhm.
right? And you could get your stuff back when you're finished. But the fact that she was incentivized to get that back, she actually poured into it and did the work. Even if she didn't remember every single thing from every lesson, that's now subconsciously in her brain. She has the language. She wrote in there. She did the exercises. We talked about the things, and I watch her use it in real time with her little brother. And so the things that I put out there, the things that I push, the thing I'm most passionate about, is because I'm seeing it happen in real time. I went from my kids being, you know, coming to visits and thinking that was normal to my grandbabies never having to. That's literally the definition of breaking intergenerational cycle, because it's just important. I can talk about it all day, it makes me emotional, but it's important and it's valid that we teach our kids how to be healthy human beings from the inside out instead of just telling them what to do, when to do. We really need to orient to them and endeavor to see the world through their view because they're just like the people we provide a service to that are grown. It's just this is before they're grown.
Mhm.
We get an opportunity to rewrite the narratives of how they grow up by being more direct, more transparent, more communicative, talking the language of healing. And when they witness us be treated poorly in public and us not responding, with rudeness, or us responding in a calm, measured, emotionally regulated way, I think all of that is important when we get into the youngsters that are killing each other in the streets. I partner with Inner City Action Network. There's a lot of gang prevention and gun violence prevention and village healing. And I've been in those conversations and I'm seeing the dire need for mentors. Joshua Smith always said this to me. And again, it's just one of those things I would hear. And then when I get into a certain situation, I'm like, I get it. But he would always say, a lack of mentors creates a lack of mentors. And that's the truth. The things you're talking about when you said, who do we blame? Um,
No one.
my counter is that's not even the question we should ask. It's not about who to blame. We're already here.
Right.
We start blaming, we're going backwards. Let's start solving, right? How do we solve should be the question, not who's at fault. Who's at fault doesn't matter when the milk's already spilled.
Yeah, you're right.
What
Yeah.
matters is where's the mop at? That's
Right.
the next question. How do we clean this up? Right? Because if we
Right.
focus all our energy on locating that, it doesn't spread as far, it doesn't do as much damage, less
Right.
space gets wet,
Mm.
right? When we think about the spilled milk analogy, we get to immediately start thinking in terms of, oh, boom, we react. If we react, usually it's poorly. But if
Right.
something happens and we train ourselves to respond to it, how are we responding to violence? Right now, in my opinion, our society responds to these things by immediately, well, who are the parents, or what school do they go to, or where do they live, or you know what I mean? Who are they hanging around? It's like, no,
Right.
no, 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 no. That's cool later, maybe to we'll get to that. But what do we do right now?
Right. No, I totally agree with that. I think that's about just being educated, or even like for myself, right? Is just stopping and to really think about like what's the situation at hand? How do we approach it appropriately? So that way we're all learning, right? And nobody gets shamed, and we make it into a learning process of what maybe not to do for the next time, or how not to do something, or we just turn it into a learning lesson. So I think everybody needs a little bit of education to just pause for just a second, even myself, and really think about what we're saying and how we're delivering it to people. Because I could say it one way, right? And in my head, it makes sense perfectly to me, right? And then you're like, hey, maybe that's not the right word, right? And it just makes me stop and think, huh, that's exactly what it is, right? I didn't take that moment before I said what I wanted to really think about how it would hit you, right? How it would hit my audience, right? And so I think just stopping, breathing, take that moment, and then move, we always make a better decision, right? More rash decision instead of using that part of our brain where we just want to react, right? Oh, we're just going to clean it, or oh, we're just going to fix it, or oh, whose fault is it? Like I had said, right? When in all reality, it doesn't matter. It already happened. Like you said, how are we going to clean it up? And how are we going to learn from this so that way in the future, the same mistake or the same mishap won't happen, or won't happen in the way where it gets the milk everywhere, right? In the hair and in the shoes and in the cupboard, right? Just to look at all the different possibilities of something and just kind of slow it down. I just believe that because, we got TikTok and Instagram and all the different social medias, it makes our brains all programmed to always just running instead of just stop for just a second and to re-regulate, to look at all the answers, just slow down really quick and understand what we're really looking at, whether it's spilt milk, a bad situation, incarceration, mental health, you know, self-regulation, whatever it may be, and just pause for a second, really think about what's going on, how can we better handle the situation, and then move instead
Mm.
of, oh no, I just got to clean it up. Well, wait, maybe there's a lesson to be learned. Let's wait and see what that lesson is. So then maybe later we won't have that same mishap, right? So then everything becomes a learning experience. I believe that, especially when we teach our kids, right? It's okay to make a mistake. So when let's say the milk spills, right? And we yell at the kids or we get upset, they're not going to make mistakes again because why? Because that first time they made the mistake, the first time they spilled that milk, right? They got yelled at, they got disciplined, they've gotten mistreated, mishandled, right? So now we've taught our kids or anybody, if you make a mistake, you're going to get reprimanded. Instead of if you make a mistake, let's figure out how to make it so that doesn't happen again. So thank you for catching me on my language and on the things that I say and that I need to even stop sometimes.
Well, it's a practice thing, right? I say
Right.
things often, and I think the more we're aware, the more we practice, the more we, self-regulate and self-check and slow down, then the easier it is to catch ourselves before we do these things. I think it's really important, what you were just talking about. One of my um, philosophies in my parenting outcome wish is that my kids are confident enough to make mistakes, right? And an
Absolutely.
example I'll use is, I have an out of house daughter that stays with us on the weekends, and she's been here for the summer, but sometimes, she'll do something and then hide the results and then be really, really, really just um I guess just anti, willing to engage about like, hey, did you do the thing? And just complete silence and just stares at you. And obviously that's a yes. We know this now. But it's like, whereas my son who lives with me full time, he can do something and he'll come and he'll have the sad face and he'll be like, Dad, I'm like, all right, let's figure it out.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right. It's just being conditioned in different ways. Right. And it's just, letting kids, because I mean, I came from that situation. I came from that background, right? Like growing up with my mom. We ever made a mistake, I got beat. I got hands put on me, right? And so in my adult life, right, it's still there just a little bit. So when I make a mistake, sometimes I do get scared, like I'm going to get hit or something bad's going to happen to me, right? That's still in my brain. That's still just who I was because that's who I grew up, conditioned to be. And so even now I have to just remind myself it's okay to make mistakes, right? To self-regulate, to remind myself, that's how we learn. And I think that's why I'm just on that path with people. It's okay to make a mistake as long as you rise afterwards, right? It's not how you fall, it's how you rise after you have fallen that really counts. It's all that really matters, right? And then
Yeah.
you apologize, you make change, but you make lasting change move on, right? There's
Move
no
on.
need to punish somebody over and over and over again for a little mistake, because then you do cause that in somebody. Oh, I can't make the mistake because I'm going to get hurt, or I'm not going to be liked, or I can't make those mistakes. And so to recondition somebody that they know that mistakes are okay after learning, from their whole life that making a mistake is not okay, is it takes a long time, but it is possible. I know it is. I make mistakes all the time, and that's all right. I'm okay with that now, right? 40 years old, and I can say that. It's okay to make a mistake. That's how we learn.
I know. It's
Coming
true.
from, right, coming from before where if I make a mistake, you know, bad things could happen to me, and just knowing now, like even now when I make a mistake, those things flash in my head. I'm like, oh no, something bad's going to happen. And then I just remind myself, right? Check in with myself. I'm okay. I'm safe. I'm good. It's okay to make mistakes. It's okay to learn, right? To have that dialogue that's already in my head to remind myself, even it's all right, and so I can relate to that. And you just have to give people, especially kids, that grace when they've been conditioned to that mistakes aren't okay, to recondition them to so that they can learn that it's okay. Just come and tell me all the
Yeah.
truth though, because I'm not going to help you navigate something that's a half truth, right? I'm not going to go and defend you on a half truth and then find out later that it's not what it is. I'm going to be a little bit upset, but I'm not going to physically harm you. I may be disappointed, but no bad intentions are going to come with it. And so I
For
think
sure.
that's with any kids, right? And I think that's just listening to the kids and just finding out how they learn. And when we do run across those kids who, when they make a mistake, they hide their stuff. I live with my niece and she does that stuff. Makes a mistake and hides it or doesn't tell me about it for weeks and weeks, and then finally we're having a sit down and she tells me some stuff, right? And it's made me stop and think, oh, I need to make a safer environment, right? So when the things happen, she can just come to me, like some things she does, and she'll just come and tell me, oh, I did this,
Yeah.
and that's cool. I love that. And I always try to tell her too, it's all right to make mistakes. Just come tell me and we'll figure it out together, right? Because together we got two brains that'll figure it out and we can navigate anything together. And so just having that safe space and just reiterating to people or even myself, right, that it's okay.
Yeah. Beautiful. Well, this is a Q&A, and I know it was kind of a short notice thing.
I
Uh,
have a question for you though.
yeah, I mean, come with as many questions as you can. We got about it's almost an hour left. I said I'd sit here for a couple hours, let people pop in and just kind of ask me about what's going on, who I am, what any questions. I'll field any questions. I fear no conversation.
Okay, so my
Do
question for you is, how did you take all the pain from your life before in prison and all that mess in the past and turn it into who I see today? Somebody very knowledgeable, intelligent, someone who wants to change the world in all the most positive ways. How did you turn that pain into something purposeful and so beautiful?
That's a good question. Let me think just for a second how I want to approach this answer. So your question is how did I turn the pain into just kind of what's going on now?
Absolutely, yes.
Um, First, I'm going to say I don't believe I turned pain into anything necessarily. I think that when you ask me how did I become an intelligent and passionate person about change, um, I've always been that. I think the difference in my life and the way I walk now is um, I unalived the avatar that was the representative of who I needed to be to survive the things I put myself in, like gangs in prison, right? So that avatar that was kind of driving the car and calling the shots was purely survival. It was almost as if my lizard brain just jumped in the driver's seat and pushed my prefrontal cortex in the it spot for the entire time. So everything was reactive. Everything was, and action motivated through fear and protecting the reputation. The reputation was the avatar, the person that I needed the world to see so that no one would harm me or attempt to. And so it was all of those things, and all the while it was painful. There was a lot of painful things I experienced, primarily as a father. The things that some of my kids have shared with me happened during my incarceration. And of course, any rational, loving father is going to bear the burden of anything negative that happens to their children, as a direct result of them not being there, in my opinion. And so what I believe happened was the survival of my nature. Um, the avatar had a, essentially killed the young, sensitive nerd in me, the smart kid, the gifted kid that was in elementary as a valedictorian and all of that, and loved animals and things like that. Version of me was on the precipice of death for that entire duration, I believe, of my 28-year judicial entanglements. I was operating as an avatar, essentially, because a lot of the things that I was involved with, didn't feel good internally, even when they were happening. But I knew the cost of standing up. I didn't have the courage to put my life in danger to speak out against something that I thought was immoral or wrong, right? So I herd mentality, right? I chose what was wrong, in spite of what I knew what was right, because the fear of being ostracized, at least in that lifestyle, could literally mean death. So there's a lot of things that I was doing while kind of watching myself do and just being disgusted and, um, hopeful of an early end. I wasn't necessarily suicidal, but there were times where I was committed to, the potential of death being an outcome in any particular situation, if that makes sense. Not
No,
that
that
I would, you know what I mean? Not that I would do
does.
things to end my own life, but if I was going to do a thing and one of the results was that, I remember being like, well, at least if that's the case, then I won't have to do this anymore, right? And a lot of those thoughts were when I was, incarcerated, primarily. And ultimately, the fire that was lit was kind of when I thought I wasn't getting out, and I had this compelling to start like writing a program. And the first program I wrote, I was actually in CTAC looking at an astronomical number, just ridiculous. And I started to write a curriculum for navigating reentry successfully. I had a module about relationships, from inside to outside, how to bridge the gap when you get out, just all these different things. And I was able to do two cohorts inside with 15 guys in each one. All of them wrote letters to my judge when I went to sentencing about the program. And then COVID happened, and then a bunch of stuff happened, and I ended up sending it out in manila envelopes, and my friend's mom, who was, in the peer field, typed it up. I sent it back in. I went to a different facility, after I got sentenced, and I entered a program there called RDAP for, it's like a drug treatment therapeutic program, give you an extra year off your sentence if you complete it. And also, it opened me up to kind of like Toastmasters and facilitation and mentoring. And it just kept pouring gas on the fire that initially started in the unit when I didn't even think I was coming home. Um, and I started to just work with guys in there on how to think different, talk different, have different worldviews on the things that we were doing in there, um, as far as like prison politics and why they're stupid and, all these different things. And I did end up having a leadership role, within the car that I was associated with. So that is kind of what became uh, the kind of DNA of our car at that time. We were leaning more towards philosophical evolution, and we would meet in the day rooms and have, book studies and actually talk about things that were going to sustain us outside of prison, because most of the people either had a release date or were in appeals and still believe that they would one day get out. So we weren't focusing on caring about what was happening in there. We were trying to invest in the versions of ourselves that would be successful. And that is what carried me straight out and into this work, is I never drifted. I never went into a different lane. Like, that seed got planted in 2019 while I was incarcerated. And in 23, the first opportunity I got, I took a recovery coach course, the peer support training, and got my first peer job. And it's been, you know, kind of just pursue it 365, right? One step a day in the direction of the person I hope to become. And that person is like the person I needed when I was 12.
No, that's a great answer. That story just gives me hope, right? That anybody can go through any situation and come out however they want, right? We can all pick any path that we want to as long as we have support and we change our mindsets, right? You talk a lot about that, right? About the different filters that we see through or the different lenses, and just changing that mindset. And so that's just beautiful. So thank you for sharing that.
I know you got some other questions.
Oh, I got lots of questions.
Oh,
uh,
don't get scared now.
I won't. So, what is the next up and coming thing that you have planned that you'd like to share?
Um, well, right now I'm working on on my private time on my home dollar, just creating trainings and workshops that really, really highlight the things that we're talking about today, right? You can see I changed my background screen because
I see.
I had a feeling this question was coming, or something along the lines of it. But I'm a life coach. I'm a certified anger management specialist. I'm one of 22 national peer reentry professionals certified. I've sat on advisory committees to help build out that curriculum. I sat on Washington State healthcare authorities. Well, I still sit on the peer support advisory group, but I also worked for peer workforce development when we were transitioning from the 40-hour to the 80-hour curriculum. I was on that team that worked on that curriculum. So, like, ever since I
Mhm.
penned my first curriculum in 2019, everything I have done has been in alignment with that assignment of developing pathways to, break down the stigma of people in post release, of, really, really dissecting reentry from the inside out and looking at like what actually is going to work for us when it comes to sustainable reduction of recidivism, right? That's what I care about the most. That's what I'm passionate about. That's what I have seen change the dynamics of my entire life and my family. And I think that the core of that is, you maybe can't see the top of the thing in my screen, but it's emotional quotient development, right? We talk heavily about education and going to school and doing all these different things. To me, those are great additions, but the core of the issues are those ACEs we talked about, right? The things that happen prior to somebody being 18, the version they were that led them to prison or to drugs or to the refusal to engage with behavioral health or mental health services, right? So they're walking around with undiagnosed, mental health things that they're trying to navigate with self-medication. A lot of these things are, I wouldn't say overlooked, but I think they are not at the forefront of the focus when people say the word reentry, you know, because even in the conversations that I've had, and I had one yesterday, with someone who said they were involved in cutting edge reentry practices. And when I asked them what that meant, because it piqued my interest, They said phone, house, car, employment. And I said, okay, those are more of the same. It's not cutting edge. Cutting edge is how do they keep the job? How do they keep their license? How do they maintain their relationship without getting into a DV or a tumultuous, toxic relationship situation? That's emotional quotient development.
Right.
If you're giving somebody a job, but you're not teaching them, like we talked about earlier in this conversation, right? You're not teaching them the social norms. You're not teaching them, or even asking them if they have the capacity or the bandwidth to work for 40 hours in a row every single week. Or maybe they should be looking for a 20-hour job and ease their way into it. We have to be able to, teach them how to interject themselves back into parenting when they've been gone 5, 6, 7, 8, 2, 3, 10 years. And
Right.
and these kids have their opinions about this particular parent, right? And the dynamics of the family have shifted where maybe when they left, they were the breadwinner, then they come home and that parent that stayed out there, whether it's the female or the male or the grandparent, had to alter their life to be able to support the children that they're now taking care of because you left. And now you're coming back. I'm like, oh, parents home, my rules, da da da. Like we have to teach how to bridge that gap so that that's smooth
Mhm.
for all parties involved, not just
Right.
the kids and the parent who's like, I got these rights. You do. And there's other things we need to discuss in order for these kids to feel safe and have an ability to transition into this relationship. And how are you going to transition? What is your relationship to society now that you're no longer tied to these gang ties or the drug life? Or who are your friends even now? Who are your natural supports that aren't toxic? Who are the ones that are still in the game, that maybe that's the address you only had to go to, but your brother lives there and he's still hustling or getting high, right? So we have to really talk about what actually longevity means for somebody, coming back to society and learning these things. And so one of the things I have coming up is called Freed to a Better Place, right? So all the work that I've done up to this point has been, massively giving my energy and intellectual energies to organizations and state initiatives and things like that. And where I try to interject some of these philosophies, they haven't really been adapted, if you will, to the fullest extent that I believe would really support people doing this work and people coming home that are also trying to do this work. Because somebody that is in the field of reentry, nonprofit space, behavioral peer support, all that, when it comes to reentry, you're not only going to be supporting people in reentry, but you're going to be hiring and supervising them, meaning you're going to have to adjust your supervision for people that have only been in society for 3 or 4 months before you hire them, and really find out where they're at so that you can meet them there. The same way that you're going to be asking them to do the work as a peer, you have to also treat them that way as a professional natural support to that person you just hired, right? And a lot of times I feel like that's where the disconnect happens, where some of the statistics and recidivism come from, is that disconnect, not connecting the, you know, level of readiness, level of, you know, capacity, bandwidth, knowledge, training, whatever it is, into the integration of what's actually happening in the workforce. And
Right.
how can we integrate this person to make these gradual upgrades to where they don't feel ashamed, less than, or they feel extra pressure to basically, like, you know, take on extra shifts because they feel, people start getting wind. Oh, they'll take the shifts. They're fresh out. So people start
Right.
calling out and just throwing them on this person, and they don't want to deny no shifts for fear of, the opportunity being taken from them. And now they're being overworked. They're getting burnt out sooner than later. Some people rise in that situation, and some people can literally crash and burn. And then we have to realize when somebody in reentry is on paper or drug court or DOSA, that their actual recovery doesn't necessarily start until there's no judicial entanglements, because that's when they have complete and utter autonomy over their life. And then they get to decide who they're going to become without someone else having requirements of them. So this is actually when their reentry starts, is when the paper's gone. That's when you know, like, it's kind of like some people don't think about, you take someone who has spent their entire um, I guess, experience with substance use disorder, going from trap house to trap house. Say this happens 3, 4 years in a row. This is what they're doing. They finally get arrested. Maybe they go to drug court, uh, therapeutic courts, whatever, right?
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
then this person gets out and you give this person a job, right? How often do you think people consider that the first time they get a check could be their actual first trigger and temptation? Not whether they, you know what I'm saying? Because when someone that has lived in that, fix to fix kind of lifestyle, what drives when they get a fix when they have money? So you take somebody, you've been working with them 3, 4, 5 months, and they don't got a job yet. They're doing good, they're getting clean UAs, and then they get a job, 2 weeks working, whatever stress they feel, whatever they're going through, they get that check. Now, if it's a decent job, that might be, a couple bands. That
Right.
might be the first time they've had a couple bands in their possession, free, without no debts to nobody, in
Right.
years, in years. And the last time that they ever had money, they went and met somebody and got a fix, right? So are we thinking about those things? Are we thinking about having those conversations preemptively? You got to plan for your first check. What are you going to do with it? How are you, like, are you saving? Are you budgeting? Do you need accountability in that? Are you worried about getting your first check? Right.
Right. Making those conversations safe to have those conversations. Yes,
And
absolutely.
and
That's a
and
great.
that's emotional intelligence. You can't do heart work without being able to read the room. You can't do this job on any spectrum, whether you're a clinician, psychiatrist, or anything, if you do not intentionally develop your emotional quotient. If you do not pursue emotional intelligence with the same energy as you pursue intellectual intelligence, the person you want to give all the credit and credentials, or, authority for having all these credentials and being book smart, those be the people that people are running from in the behavioral health field that say are causing the harm because of the way they're treating them. If you lack emotional intelligence, you shouldn't be in this field, in my opinion, because you're healing humans, not numbers, not data points, not deliverables. They're human beings. Human beings operate first. You feel a thing, then you think about it. They say our emotional mind is first before our prefrontal cortex. We don't think about feelings, we feel them, and then we think about what to do with those feelings. So emotional intelligence is a necessary, it's imperative that we build our emotional intelligence. And that's why I created some of the workshops. That's what's up and coming. Some of the books that really focus on this is By Whose Authority and We Are What We Agree To. And I just think that weaving those books into the model, the training, Freed to a Better Place is an acronym. Freed is Focus, Reentry, Efforts, Education, and then To a Better Place. Place is an acronym for Professional Life After Crime Evolution. So we talk about evolving to a different person. The caterpillar is before, the butterfly is after,
Right.
but the metamorphosis in the cocoon is where the work is done. And that's where we need to focus our efforts, not on the final product or the product before it goes into the cocoon. The cocoon is where the work is done. That's where the most fertile ground is for the change. So that determines what kind of butterfly comes out on the other end.
No, that's great. That's great. I was just going to ask the next question is tell me a little bit about your book that is out, and I really like to know.
Which book? The By Whose Authority is the latest. It's called By Whose Authority: The Power of Professional Suggestion. And I can give you a quick table of contents since
All right.
I have a copy here.
Very
It's
nice.
available on Amazon. But we talk about the agreements you didn't know you made is the introduction. Chapter 1 is the power of professional suggestion. Chapter 2 is We Are What We Agree To, revisited. Chapter 3, we go into implicit bias, the invisible influence. Chapter 4 is confirmation bias, protecting the narrative. Chapter 5 is herd mentality, that discussion we were having earlier, which is agreement by association. Chapter 6 is condition not to question. 7 is labels, diagnoses, and identity. Chapter 8 is the dark side of professional suggestion. Chapter 9 is the agreement loop. 10 is discernment and action. Chapter 11 is the re-agreement, rewriting your identity. And then conclusion. And I really wanted to give readers kind of a roadmap of my philosophy, right? So conclusion says, what do I do now with this? And the reason why I say that is because often we say don't. But I was taught if you're going to provide a don't, provide the do with it, right? So if I say, for example, hey, don't be attached to a peer's outcomes, then what should you be attached to? I say, well, engagement is the outcome. Be attached to your engagement, how you show up, how you are ethical and leaning on your trainings and being moral and just how you're holding space. That's the only outcome you should be attached to if you're doing this work because you don't know what's going to happen. And if you take it home, you're going to burn out, you're going to affect your family, and you're not going to be able to do the work through the lens of doing no harm because you're going to eventually cause harm if you're taking on vicarious trauma and not, you're taking on the outcomes. Someone comes
Right.
in, you work with them for 3 months, maybe they pass away. You can't take the blame for that. All you can do is be attached to how you showed up in those times where you were able to spend time with them. And it's easier said than done because we're human, we're compassionate, we love the work, we're empaths, but it's a practice. You have to practice differentiating your responsibility from the outcomes of the people that you're in service to. You have to understand that they're going to make their decisions. All you could do is provide space and tools and hope for the best. And so that's kind of where, and so the last chapter is basically now that I've said all these things, now that you've went through all these chapters, you've learned all these things, what do I do now with this? How do I move forward? How do I create,
Right.
solutions? And that's kind of what that chapter goes into, points you into some invitations into some other learnings and studying and, things like motivational interviewing. If you're able to get into a training of that, do so, right? I'm not saying I'm the authority on anything or all things. My books are an invitation to an explanation of my worldview. That's it. I'm not saying this is it, and if you don't do it this way, you're doing it wrong. Never make that claim. These are assertions that I'm making based on my experience, my training, my education, and the things that I have seen with my own eyes working in my own family and in my own life. 95% of the examples I use in my books are from my own life.
No, that's great. Which is your favorite book that you have published so far?
Hmm, good question. It's hard for me to say because they all are different. So like the first book I ever wrote was called Coach B's 4 Cycles of Freedom. It's like an 80-page memoir, and it really talks about the internal journey I made to set myself free while still in prison. And it's 4 cycles of freedom that talks about. And there's pictures of different things, me on the prison yard in the feds, me shaking hands with the district attorney as a keynote speaker at an event at the halfway house I had just left 3 months previous. So it's like showing the immediate manifestation of the things that I sat with the old heads in the day rooms with, prior to getting home, and just enacting that vision and that plan and just sticking to it, pursue it 365, right? Getting out and just taking one step a day in the direction that I said I was going to go, right? No open doors go unexplored. If there's an opportunity that is presented to me that's in alignment with what I'm doing, then I check my bandwidth and capacity. And if I have it, I'm in, right? And that has literally been what has led my pathway. It's just people saying, hey, you want to do this thing? Or, hey, you should apply here. I think this would really fit you. And me just agreeing and accepting the invitations to step into sometimes challenging opportunities, where I had to rapidly learn things that I didn't know in order to kind of be on par with even my, coworkers and things of that nature. And those are things that people aren't often going to talk about or hear about. They just think, "Oh, look at these great things. He's so smart and he's doing so well." But no, no, it was work. It's still work, and it's humbling. It's been humbling. The part, I am big-hearted and sometimes sensitive about things. So one of the hardest part is one of the four agreements, I strive to adhere to is not taking things personal. That's probably one of the hardest things I had to do is listen to things that people are saying about me in rooms I'm not in for no reason that are completely false, that I don't even understand why they would say these things or spread them, and then be in spaces with these people in professional settings, knowing that I have receipts for these things they said, and being able to just maintain and tell myself like, hey, I don't understand it, but I'm not going to take it personal because I didn't do anything to this person to cause them to want to attack my character. And so part of by whose authority is getting down to my favorite. I really don't have one because, like I said, they're different. There's the memoir, there's the anger management and aggression, and I think for what it's designed to do, I love anger management. I love emotional regulation. I love teaching people. I love learning new techniques from people. I love taking trainings and doing trainings. And the fact that my daughter facilitated with me for the first time, my 12-year-old daughter who did this book, she's probably the only person I know personally that have done the entire book, right? I know people that I work with that have the book, but they maybe stopped after 5 or 6 chapters and then would admittedly be like, oh, I stopped working out of it, whatever, but I got a lot from it. So in my eyes, my 12-year-old daughter next to me is the subject matter expert on this book and the tools in it because she's used them, all of them, did the work. And so that's one of my favorite of everything that's out there because of what its purpose is, what its hopeful impact is on community is that I was able to put something in a way that you can go all the way down to 11 years old, or you could be any aged adult and still get valuable tools and be able to learn things that help you communicate. And the fact that you can get two books, one for you and one for, one of your kids, you might, and do them together, to me makes it one of my most favorite and impactful. But I've written a parenting book. By Whose Authority is my favorite. Um, it's my favorite invitation to the professional community that do what we do because it talks about things that I know are taboo, that I know will make people uncomfortable. It talks about things that I know people have probably done in their career, blocking people's opportunities for fear of losing theirs, or just doing things out of herd mentality, spreading a rumor you didn't have actual proof on, you didn't have receipts, but because it was being spread and you were in a group, you did it anyway. These are the things that I'm bringing to the front in this book. It's going to make people uncomfortable, but uncomfortability is where we grow. So if nobody's willing to do it, then I guess it's part of my assignment to do it. So,
No, you must be so proud to have your daughter go and help you facilitate and then learn that knowledge to teach her friends. Like that has got to be the most proudest moment that you can have as a parent, to know that she just went and did it on her own. Right now it's in her, right? And now she's just going to teach all the other kids, and then the kids are going to teach the kids. Like that is just very inspirational. Um, if you would like the community to know one thing about you, what would that one thing be?
hmm, that, I really believe that we don't have a community if we don't collaborate. I believe that with my entire being. I believe that with my whole heart. I believe that, if you're in a neighborhood and there's multiple kids and multiple parents, I believe that, we all should be contributing to the pouring into of those kids in the neighborhood. Even if we don't talk as adults in the neighborhood, if your kid's over at my house and they're doing something and I have some wisdom, I feel obligated to drop those bars on the youth, right? And give them
Right.
something to think about and something to take with them. I think we all have a responsibility to contribute to making our communities better and safer. And the more mentors we have, the more people that feel empowered to just speak life into a youth, even if they're just running into them instead of yelling at them or posting on, the little Facebook groups. I've seen these kids riding their bikes. Hey, go out there and say, hey, come here, let me talk to y'all for a minute about, let's do a little safety thing real quick. You're not in trouble or nothing. Just let me holler at y'all. Let me give y'all some instructions. Like my daughter, we got her one of the bikes. And one of the first things, it's the same daughter, Aries. And before she left on the bike, we got the helmet, and I was like, "Hey, I need you to go research hand signals. And when you're done researching, I'm not going to tell you where to research or what to look for, but when you're done, you're going to get on your bike in front of me in the driveway, and you're going to show me all your signals and explain them to me, or you're not leaving the driveway on that bike." And she went and YouTubed, Googled, whatever she did. She came
Right.
back and she got in front of me, and
And she
she
knew.
she did like damn near a whole training course, like she wrote it, and it was didn't miss a beat, right? And I
Right.
recorded it and I sent it to her mom. She was at work at the time, and I was like, these are the things that I just think make me so proud of the ability to not have my life go down the two pathways that I was given as a youth, death or in prison. You know,
Right. Yeah.
and,
No, to
and
give our kids a different path than the ones that we had. That's what it's all about. That's the whole, or I believe that's the whole reason we do all this, right? Is so that we teach our kids what not to do. We show them a better life. We show them more instructions. We educate them. We allow them to make those mistakes, just like you had said.
yeah, yeah. And she got just something I want, and I think people should know. you know, this wasn't a thing where I took my daughter over there as a prop. She got $100.
Mhm.
She got almost half of what I got to even be there. You know what I'm saying? So I think
Yeah.
part of that too for me, part of that was establishing without saying it to her, like know your value. Don't have
Absolutely.
people, just tokenizing you or using you or pivoting you to do something that has an initiative. Like we talked about this. She knew this was important and had a much more valuable impact because the group that I was, facilitating to was there for Hillagevilling, gun violence prevention, anything anti-gang, anti-violent. And so I thought it was a beautiful, demonstration of that intergenerational healing when you have the youngest person in the room is 12 years old and the eldest person in the room was 70 plus, right? And
Wow,
and
that's
and them
amazing.
and them being willing to, you know, give the 12-year-old the floor and the space, and they encouraged her when she was nervous, and she killed it. Like she was very eloquent and mature and poised, and she did her, she studied because we talked about, I was like, hey, if you're going to get paid as a co-facilitator, then you're going to at least read and study and have whatever your part in this is practiced and understood. And if you don't want to do it, no pressure, no worries. But if you do, I'm going to treat you like an employee, and you're valued, and your lived experience is your
That's
subject
beautiful.
matter expert. As a
Yeah.
12-year-old, nobody can tell your story better than you. So she went up there and she did the connection before content prompt when she told her truth, and then she directed into the video, and after the video the next exercise, and it was she got a standing ovation, and these men and women were pouring into her, and it was a really really beautiful thing. Big shout out to Inner City Action Network, Lavelle Sykes, and also Arms Around You, Avon Curtis. Those are the two organizations that I you know partnered with me to come out there and do that, and they are using How to Train Your Lizard in their programming, in their
That's great.
yeah, there was a youth who had took some gunshot wounds, and they were visiting him in the hospital, and they had left the book with him. And similar to my daughter, in my experience, when the advocates checked back up on the youth, he had a couple of his homeboys in there, and they was going through the book. and they was learning about emotional regulation and how to train their lizard brain, right? And so,
Right.
I'm really excited, and full disclosure, I make almost nothing doing like the books. Most of the time I'm giving this stuff away. That right there, though, stories like that, and again, shout out to another brother, associated with that organization, Paul Sutton, because he called me specifically to tell me that, and I thought that there was more value in him relaying that message to me about how these books are being utilized and the impact
Absolutely.
they're
Yes.
actually having would be more than if it became a bestseller tomorrow, right?
Mhm.
I would feel more value and validated from successful stories like that, stories of hope, where maybe that one kid or one of his homeboys completely got out of the system or started changing and didn't get as violent as they were previously because they started implementing some of these tools. So I can't be more satisfied with those results, even if I'm in debt and broke.
Right.
I didn't write books to get money from them. I wrote books to enrich the population of people that I wanted to reach back into and support. And it started out with like the guys I had just left, right? There's a little bit of survivor's guilt when you do a lot of time and you're leaving really, really good, compassionate, smart, intelligent mentors behind that may never get out, right? So, how could I support them if not getting back into the prisons with this good stuff to show that people like them can get out and do what I'm doing?
No, that's a beautiful story. And I think more people need to hear that because it just instills hope, not just in the person who's trying to change their life, but in their whole community. I think what you've done is absolutely beautiful, right? Like you've changed more people's lives than I think you even probably realize, with your
Mhm.
books and just showing up and just being who you are and just demonstrating that to your family, to your daughter, to let her be the next generation who pushes that even farther. That's just, there's no words for that. That's a very,
You're wearing the one word I can think of.
right. Absolutely. Right. That's it. The hope, right? You give the hope to
And
everybody. And that's what's so beautiful is that,
I wouldn't say I want to reframe. I personally don't believe I give hope. I think I invite people to feel hopeful.
yes, yes.
And hope is something I think is established internally, right? People have to realize hope, embrace hope, or accept hope. I don't think it can be given to people. That's my worldview, right?
Right.
And like my daughter wants to be a traveling nurse because she wants to help people, right? It's not the same thing I'm doing. It's not, speaking and all of that. However, I'm so proud that that's something that lives in her, and I will pour gasoline on that for as long as that's what she believes she wants to do, right? Because
Right.
there's no, to me, again, my worldview is there's no higher calling than the preservation of life and being,
Absolutely.
proactive in supporting community, individual. All it takes is one. If I can definitively say that I saved one person's life, then I got an A
That's
on
all that
my
matters.
assignment. Everything else is extra credit.
Yes. Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I know that we're running out of time. You said that you were only going to be on here for an hour, and now it's at an hour and a half.
Well, no, I said 2 hours. It was, the meet and greet was just kind of a thing. I'm sitting home chilling, and so I wanted to just take some time to pop it, you know, share who I am, right? I do a lot of interviewing. It's very rare that people come on my platform and just get into me, right? Asking me things.
Right. No,
There's
that's why
about
I don't mean to interrupt, but that's why I jumped in because you're always talking to everybody else, right? And wondering about everybody else. I was like, ooh, it's the time where I can go ask some questions that I've wanted to know and, let our community know too. And so, no, I'm just grateful for the opportunity to be in the driver's seat today.
hell yeah, hell yeah. We got 20 minutes. If you got some tough questions, I'm intrigued.
Tough questions. Okay.
Yeah, let's get your curiosity game up.
All right. Okay. So, knowing everything that you've been through, all these great books that you've written, what is the next chapter for Coach B?
Well, I think ultimately I'm moving more into, I think, I think it's always kind of been there, but I'm moving more away from, I guess, direct services, if you will, where I'm not doing so much one-on-one with individuals. And part of it is in part because I can't necessarily always ask people if they're on DLC. I feel, weird about that. So it's kind of like because there's an ethical consideration working for DLC, to make sure I'm not working directly with people under the jurisdiction of DLC. There's a conflict there. So since I've took the job, I think it, I've moved more towards like business consulting and like program development on my private life. Like, I work for DLC till 4. And then when I clock off, I clock into, Coach B and Pie Talk type of thing. So when it comes to like my personal projects or the projects with the Independent Hope Dealers Group, which is not an organization, a nonprofit, anything, it's really literally just a group of powerhouse individuals across the United States that come, and with their input, feedback, contributions, we've been developing, some trainings that are kind of like, for us, by us type of thing. And we're touching on things that we feel like, aren't being addressed in our communities, and we're addressing them ourselves. And we're creating spaces that can take these trainings to other people, other organizations. I want to change things from the inside out because I think it's not necessarily, we always say systems are broke, systems are broke. Well, systems are made up of people. If we get to the people, then the system eventually will be affected in a positive way. So we have to get to the people in the system and show them things that we want them to see. And hopefully when we show them these things, it will start a shift, a culture shift, a system shift. And it's not going to happen overnight, and it's not going to happen in a year or two. But again, pursue it 365. If we do something along the lines of moving in the direction of the system that we want to see, then every engagement we have with the people in the system has to be moving in that alignment. We can't have these complaining conversations anymore. We need to have solution focused conversations, right? The milk spilled already. Okay. Every time you talk to someone in the system, explain to them how this mop is better than that mop, or what, let's just have all these solution focused conversations and ideas and throw whatever we can against the wall until something sticks. Because everything that's been tried so far is increasing recidivism, increasing drug overdoses, increasing the deaths in the opioid, increasing houselessness. We're not decreasing any of it. So I think with what's happening right now, we're in that space where we're trying to, like, it's spinning this way, and we're trying to get it to start spinning this way.
Right.
Right. And I think that the more conversations we have like this, the more leaders we have like yourself that are, running for office, that are willing to just be in space, be in community, and you actually are a voice of community and the people. You have lived experience. And I think you're bridging the gap to a whole different demographic of people, um, and bringing me to these spaces, some of the spaces you brought me to, and allowed me to share the voice of people that I meet with. That's how we change systems. And in my most humble and heartfelt opinion, I think it starts with people. People just being willing to meet, people not being afraid of conversations, people not weaponizing their belief system against this belief system, and just being willing to lead conversations with curiosity and endeavor to see the worldview of other people. That's all we need to do. And if we can do that, we can find common ground because we find what we're looking for. If we look for differences, we'll highlight them. If we look for commonalities, we'll see them. So
Mhm.
I think the energy shift should be looking for more solutions and commonalities instead of, differences and conflicts. That's what I see a lot of. I see a lot of differences and conflicts and gatekeeping and you versus me and competition and all these different things where it's like, but why? If I can lift 150 pounds and you can lift 100 pounds. Mathematically, that's 250, right?
Right.
But we know that if me and you both grab the same thing, we can probably lift 500 pounds.
Right.
We know that. So even though the math ain't mathing, it's because when communities come together, when people collaborate, bigger things get lifted. Things happen. It's leverage. We have to leverage our relationships, our skills, our lived experience, and throw it all in the same pot and hope for the best and pursue the same goal. People say they're pursuing the same goals, but then when other people will reach out to them or try to partner, it's like they got all the excuses in the world about why, oh, I don't have the bandwidth or the capacity to have a conversation. But you can go on a podcast and talk about nothing
For hours.
for hours, right? You can shame people and talk about all the things you hate about everything, but when someone reaches out and is like, "Hey, let's talk about how to solve those things I've seen you ranting about for 2 weeks straight. You want to have a solution focused conversation?" And then it's like, "Oh, yeah, I'll get back to you." There's not enough clicks and likes for people talking positivity, so they rather sell the drama, But it's the
Than
difference,
anything
right?
else. Yeah, absolutely. And so, with what you said, if you had the keys, right, and you could change everything to make a better community, right, because we're just going to stay local right now, right? We'll change the world later. But for right now, if you had the keys, how would you change or what would you implement to make the world that you see in your mind a reality?
Moderated community forums, big ones, on topics that are, actually affecting the community, the like asking, having panels of community members that can rotate onto the stage and ask their questions or speak their piece without being booed or shunned or the threat of being canceled because what they're speaking about offends this minority group or that minority group. People can feel the way they feel, and I think that when we avoid having these conversations and we start making everything taboo that's uncomfortable, we isolate ourselves from each other because now we're all walking around as avatars like we're in Ready Player One. Nobody's actually saying what they feel or being who they're supposed to be in real life because they're more concerned with the herd mentality of if you don't operate this way, then we're going to ostracize you and we're going to make it hard for you to get a job or hard for people to follow you. We're going to cancel you because you don't agree with this particular ideology. And I think that's, for lack of a better terms, I think it's stupid. And I think it's harmful, and I think it's childish, and I think it's immature, and I think ultimately it's a society that lacks emotional quotient.
Okay, so now my next question, real quick. So how would you change that into something positive and something that you would see more welcoming?
Well, that's what I'm saying. I mean, if we had a really great forum for whether it's what do we call those, like town halls, where it's actually a town hall and not like an agenda specific messaging, where it's actually like, hey, put your questions on a paper, bring them up to the front, and actually have a panel of people that are focused on solutions. And I'm not talking about politicians. I'm talking about, nonprofit leaders, people that can actually affect change. So I have this saying in advocacy where I say, never accept a no from the person who can't authorize the yes. Put all
Absolutely.
put all the people who can say yes in a room and bring the community to that room and let them start solving the community's problems. Why does it, by whose authority does it have to be a legislative representative, right?
Right.
Why does it have to be a politician that sets forth initiatives to solve our communities, right? Because a lot of times, not all, and I don't want to make a blanketed statement, so I'm gonna just say, generally speaking, based on my limited knowledge of politics, that the longer someone's in politics, the further removed they get from the communities they're representing. That's my assertion, right? And so now you have someone who's been in a seat 10 plus years, living their politician lifestyle, and they're representing people, and maybe they forgot where they came from. You know, they've got really accustomed to the lifestyle they're living, the treatment they get as a politician, the things that go into being a politician versus when they maybe first started and they're, you know, they had that lived experience, they were angry or they were passionate about changing things because it affected them directly. 10, 15 years into politicians and they're doing well, they're not affected by the things. They're far removed from the community. But then they do things like SIM, for example, right? Sequential intercept mapping. I attended one that had zero people with lived experience, but they're talking about the mapping out of the services provided for the people with lived experience that use the services. Why aren't they in the room?
That doesn't even
Now
sound
that
right, right? Yeah, how are you
that
going to have a conversation? Sorry.
No, no, you're right. That's exactly, you're speaking what the thoughts were in my mind. At the time, I worked somewhere, and I'm not trying to put anybody or shade anybody. These are facts, right? And the job I worked at, my boss had went to this. It was a 2 day thing, and during the lunch of the first day, my boss returned and was like, "You need to be in this. I'm gonna, you know, cancel your appointments. Come with me. I'm gonna introduce you after lunch because like there's hardly any, or not hardly, but there's no one there that was a recipient of the services of this. I think it was, we're doing like 0 to 1 or 2 of the intercept mapping. And if you're not familiar with it, those of you that are watching, just look up sims, sequential intercept mapping. It's like a county, different counties do it to just figure out the gaps from like contact of police to arrest to court date to probation to prison. It's like all these different intersections, and so they literally map out where the gaps are in the services. And so I came near and I had probably easily 10 bullet points worth of things that an entire room full of people never even thought to ask because nobody in that room had lived experience. Nobody had been on the receiving end of the services they're mapping out. So, you know, to answer your question, have more of those forums when you're talking about solving community issues with the community who are the recipients of those solutions. They should
So,
be in the conversation to solve the things.
so you mean like a committee? Is that what you was that kind of what you're talking about, or can you just like
Like like
elaborate just a little bit on that for me?
like I said, a town hall. That's what a town hall is really meant to do. But actually, you know, going back to the etymology of like a town hall and getting back to the basics, actually having people from the town in a meeting with the people that are able to create change and those yes people. If you can't solve a thing, you shouldn't be in the conversation.
No, I totally agree with that. I think that if we can't be in the conversation, right, we find somebody who can be in the conversation and who can have those conversations to better our communities. I totally agree with you on that. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, it's an old wise adage that says never discuss your problems with someone who can't solve them. And I used to add to that or is unwilling to try, right? Because the person might fully be capable of solving your problems, but not interested.
Right. And that
So they'll,
happens a lot. Yeah.
yeah, they'll hear you out, they'll hear your things, you'll tell them all the things you need, and they could literally push a button or make a phone call and essentially give you an opportunity to solve the thing, and they don't, right? So
Right.
the old wise adage is never discuss your problems with people that are unwilling to solve them or incapable, right? Because what's the point?
Right. It's going to fall on deaf ears, is exactly what it's going to do. And you're just,
So find the change agents, find the movers and shakers, find the solution makers, find the yes men and women, and get them in a room with the people who need things solved.
no, that's a great answer. Yeah, no, I'm just sitting here just processing that, just thinking about that and just thinking about how I can do that, right? To better our communities, right? Like how can I pull that off, to get forums going so that we can just get conversations going and flowing, and just getting that information from the right people to get that to the right people who change the laws, you know. If I don't, get elected and I can't change the laws, right? Who Let's find the people who can. Let's get these forums going, right? So then that way the correct information is sent to the correct people to make the correct changes for our communities to better help our communities, right?
I mean, it sounds
There,
so
there you go.
simple.
It sounds really,
It sounds
it
so
sounds
simple,
easy, right?
right? But
It's
you know
not.
the old saying, right? Easier said than done, for sure.
Absolutely. But no, I
But
mean, there's something that we just figured out, right? Like here's a problem, here's a solution. And that's one thing I love about your podcast, about everything that you do, is that it makes your mind question things, right? It pushes you to evolution. It makes you want to change, right? So then all the shakers and movers were sitting there and we're like, okay, how are we going to do this? Right? How are we going to make this, how are we going to push this forward to better our communities? And so I think that's exactly what we need, right? Is more of those kind of leaders, right? Who say, maybe I don't know all the information or the correct people, or I'm not even the one to tell, but how do we get all these people in the room to discuss the topics that we really need to move forward? And then we can have, like you said, the right people with the right constituents in the room together making the right change.
Exactly. Exactly. I believe it wholeheartedly. And again, I don't never put myself out there to be the guru or the know-it-all or the authority. All I'm saying is I found my assignment, and part of that assignment is inviting people into different worldviews, inviting people into, thinking about things differently than they have been so far. And hopefully in that process, you evolve a little bit. I mean, maybe, maybe not. But at the end of the day, I just don't believe in running from conversation. I don't believe in making things taboo that are words that come out of people's mouths, because sometimes the words they're using is data, and all data is valuable. All data teaches you something. And if you look at what people are saying through the lens of data, right? What is that telling me? That is how you develop your emotional quotient, is bringing in the data and using your discernment. Those of you that believe in a higher power and believe in, an all powerful being that has given you free will, well, there's only one way to use your free will correctly, and that's with discernment. You have to be able to take in information, be curious about information, and not make reactive decisions based on he said, she said, herd mentality, or anything like that. You have to be willing to dissect information, see how it makes you feel, then question why it makes you feel the way it's making you feel. Where does that come from? It takes some work and some courage to do internal deep dives, but in the end, it's worth the evolution. It's worth expanding your mind. It's worth expanding your worldview. And it's worth connecting with people that you would never have thought to connect with, right? As a trainer, I constantly see people that believed prior to the training they would never associate or have friendships with some of the people that they become really close with in the trainings, because you have trainings, of people coming from all across the state, sometimes in a virtual space, sometimes they're traveling to do an in-person training, right? And a lot of times a lot of the people in these rooms have never met before in person, or maybe they follow each other on social media or something, and then and you could ask them individually to make a list of people that they would associate with. And one of my opening exercises really dials into connecting people and creating a space where there's a highlight to commonalities. And when that exercise is done, every like 100 out of 100 times when I do the debrief of this particular exercise, people are shocked and surprised that there's people in the room that they never would have talked to or thought to be like them or part of their culture. And then they go through this exercise and they're like, dang, we have way more in common than not. And it's that realization that it becomes, we are what we agree to, is why I wrote that book. Like, we really are what we agree to. If I agree that I'm not supposed to interact with, or I'm supposed to feel a negative way towards this demographic of people, or I'm not supposed to question authority, or I'm not supposed to apply for this particular job, then I've already put the ceiling on myself
Right.
just by that agreement, right? If you tell me no and I don't believe you're the person who could even authorize the yes, your no is irrelevant to me in my worldview. I'm going to go right past you to something else. If I see someone trying to put a ceiling on me or anyone, that I'm working with, that doesn't belong to them, then I will question that. I will challenge them to think about that. Like, do you agree with that ceiling? Because if you don't, it goes away.
Right. Right. I love how you ask those questions that need to be asked that aren't asked, but you ask it in a soft way, in a conversation that opens up people to have those conversations. I love how even in our Tuesday group, right? In our cups group, there's some people in there I would have never thought I would have ever talked to, and so just setting up those conversations, because those are the conversations I believe have the most impact in our world, right? Is when you get the people together who probably should be together so that they can have those conversations. That's when the change happens, right? Because that's when all the shakers and the movers are like, oh, we have something in common and we're going to shake and we're going to move on this. Let's get it, right? Let's move
Yeah.
this. Or we're going to do this and we're going to do this together. That's where the best collaborations happen. And
Yeah, for sure.
that's where growth happens, and that's where we can help each other, and that's when we grow from each other. That's when we feed each other, right? That's where we go to. There's the flyer in the background. That's where we go to get our cups filled. But we don't let anybody in. We don't let no snakes in, so that we all can always have our cups overflowing. And I think that more spaces like that need to be available for people, because even just being in that group, there's so many people in there who are just so shocked and surprised that we come with love, understanding, and just a second just to breathe and just to have empathy for each other, and how
Well, yeah, let's share the group agreements, right? This is the oasis. The platinum rule is treat others how they want to be treated. Vegas plus rule, what happens here stays here, what's learned here leaves here. Three, engagement is the outcome. Four, unconditional positive regard for the space and those in it. And lead every conversation with curiosity. This is a judgment-free zone. And then we have the one mic rule, right? This is a virtual space. We meet every Tuesday. So a lot of times, sometimes we got moderators that have to cut people's mics off that accidentally come on while someone is speaking. But other than that, you know, this is this is the beauty of creating spaces where people can come together and have those solution focused conversations. So if you ask me again that question from earlier, like what would it look like? It would look like the Independent Hope Dealers Group, except larger and in a community and in person where people are only there to collectively solve and look for ways to heal, and no one's there to complain, shame, blame, put down, attack. you know um, yeah, it's hard to be in spaces where that's what people think is okay to do. I went to a forum recently and somebody was yelling pig at the one of the sheriff candidates and things like that. And I'm like, okay, I get that you have strong feelings, but is that necessary, right? Does that create a space for solutions when you're, that's verbal violence. Like why do you have to, whatever. We're not going to get into all that. I'm pro peace.
right.
I believe I don't like to conflict. I don't want to argue with people. I would just like to invite people to conversations that hopefully the outcome of those conversations are a more expanded worldview for a bridge to a better outcome, hopefully. Like I don't have
Right.
any other intentions. I don't have any agenda. I don't get grants. I don't have all this money like most people. They get grants and they start nonprofits so that they could come up off it. Yeah, they get to do the work, but they're using the nonprofit to live a better life financially. I work two jobs to do nonprofit work. That's the complete different view of it, right? And so those people that really think they see on Facebook, oh, this person must be rolling in it. No,
Mhm.
it's not that at all, right? I live in gratitude. You see me smiling in Facebook a lot because 4 years ago I was incarcerated, and 5 years before that I didn't know if I'd ever get out. I'm happy broke. I'm happy in debt. I'm happy to wake up with my family and not have to be limited to a 15-minute phone call. So I live, call it a cheat code or a superpower, but I have a different metric to measure my gratitude against. And some of you that have never been incarcerated, not that you should ever get incarcerated, but it's a
Don't
super
start now. No.
no, but it's a superpower that those of us that are released have, should we choose to use it, is the ability to compare our life now to having just been where we were. I live in gratitude. Whenever I remember that metric, whenever I remember problems or the arguments or anything that could potentially disrupt my peace, I remember when I was locked up, all I ever wanted to do was be out
Mhm.
the whole time.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? And couldn't
Yeah.
get out until they said it was time, right? So now that I'm here, like, man, I don't take things personal. I do what I do. I'm in alignment with my assignment. That's pretty much all I got. I love life. I love my kids. I love my grandbabies. I love being a young, fit grandpa. I get to really enjoy my time with them and do things um, sports wise and health wise. I'm just grateful for all the different ways and the 8 dimensions of my wellness where the spokes are pretty full in almost all the dimensions, right? So even if my financial dimension isn't the best, so what? I got 7 other dimensions where I have a lot of richness. You know what I mean? So, life is good. The things I get to do, the people I get to meet, these are all privileges. And I am grateful and humble. I have some amazing ass national mentors. Like I get to learn from people that are way smarter than me on a regular basis, and that excites me, and I'm grateful for that because I'm a nerd. I love learning. Always have. All the things I'm doing now, I always wanted to do, but didn't feel like I had the courage to shake the avatar or that my life was in danger if I tried to walk away at an earlier time. And I think even when it comes to gang life, someone, in their mid 30s going into the 40s have a lot easier time retiring than a 19, 20, or 21-year-old who's in the same gang. I think eventually, even if it's not spoken out loud, I think it's easier for older heads to get out and to change their life around. It's not as easy for the youngsters. They're still having their lives threatened. No, you ain't putting in enough work. You can't just walk away, right? It's
Right.
not as easy as we get out. We're older heads, I'm in my 40s. And, some of them might be like, oh, that's the OG or whatever. And neither here nor there. But at the
Hmm.
same time, I know that if I tried to walk away 20 years ago, I probably wouldn't have been able to. The
Right.
fact the fact that, timing is just the timing. I'm in alignment with my assignment. I pivoted at a time where it was right. It was right. I was the ground internally was fertile for the change. The support system, the indoctrinating I was getting into by my mentors, the people that were answering my phone call on the other end of the phone this time down were all positive. I didn't get out to anyone that was still in a game, negative or wanting to do negative stuff that was pouring into me or trying to pressure me. This entire time was full of support. And I'm consistently in gratitude for those people and even the awards that I have won over the last 3 years. None I expected and none I strove for. I give that credit to them because
Right.
they're the true champions. They're the ones that were doing peer support before I ever even, took my first peer course. And if it wasn't for their supporting me, there would be no Coach B, you know, uh,
Right.
leader in the field and all these things that I have been, gifted to be called. And again, I even accept titles like leader as a gift because authority is a gift. It's given. When someone says, "Hey, I will follow that person," that's a gift, and I'm not going to squander that gift and lead anybody into any weird situations or
Right.
catastrophic demonstrations of poor social behavior. It's just not going to happen. The avatar is has passed. I grieved him. That person was with me for a long time. It was a hard thing to grieve, but at the end of the day, he needed to get out the way so I could be me.
I love that. That's beautiful. You know, I believe that that's with everybody, right? We got to say goodbye to that old person, right? We get to take all the memories though with us, right? So we're intelligent with that part, but that avatar, that body, that person, those relationships, we have to dead that and say goodbye and be okay with that, because to have a new life, we have to say goodbye to the old one, right? What's the new life worth though, too? We got to think about too. If it's worth everything, then go get it, you know, and it always is. It's a long road. Some nights you cry. I know I have.
Oh
But then,
man, that's yeah. Yeah, my
right,
credentialing
Linda said just
just
cry.
man, yeah, you just touched my heart right. I'm just like, man, it's recent, man. I was, there's a couple of times where I've had to call some of my mentors like fully fully ready to give up the path because it just didn't seem like it felt like I wasn't in alignment, but ultimately I knew I was, and just having that faith, and again that pursuing it 365. If I'm like, all right, if it's one thing I do today, even if it's just reminding myself not to give up, that's one step in the direction of who I want to become. And I think we have to give ourselves grace. The one thing we do a day doesn't have to be grandiose. It could literally be, you know what, you want to become a better person, a more healed person. That one thing a day could be calling your mom and apologizing for something that's been sitting on you. It could be, anything, right? It could be emailing
Brushing your
somebody,
teeth, taking a shower, washing your clothes, changing your blankets. Just those little bitty
anything,
bitty
yeah,
things.
anything that pours into a better outcome. And the last thing I'll leave you with before we get out of here is just something me and you had talked about the other day, right? Is surround yourselves with things that you can subliminally implant into your being, right? Like, and so for
Right.
example, in my office, just looking around right now, I see by whose authority, I see the four agreements, I see a sign that says never stop dreaming, another one that says good things come to those who hustle, a picture of all my kids, a picture of a beautiful place in Italy where I want to one day go. I look to my left, I see hope. Anchors the soul, Hebrews 6:19. I see a peer-to-peer certificate. I see all these different things, right? Pursue internal evolution. Someone gave me this rock that I keep on my desk, right? Cute little thing you would never think of, but it says you make the world a better place.
Oh, that's so nice.
I have my medicine, I have my sage, I have candles, um, things that are cool that I just, I'm a nerd, right? Riley,
Right. Yeah.
come on, and it's just like everywhere you look. So if it's your bathroom, if you spend a lot of time in your office, hang up the messages. It's almost like create a 3D vision board in your space. Everything you want to become, everything you value, everything you feel good about, sayings that you like, put them somewhere where you can constantly vicariously be affected by them. And you will start to kind of reprogram yourself, right? We are what we
Right.
agree to, we are what we subject ourselves to, and surround yourself with positive imagery, messaging, and hopeful sayings. Family, if that's big for you, really make your space part of your plan. That's how you manifest. That's one of the ways, and in my humble and professional opinion, of course, right?
That's
Again, I'm not
beautiful.
I'm
Yeah.
not the authority on anything. I just offer people invitations to do things differently if you feel like there's upgrades that you can make in your life. This
No,
has
that's
been one of the
beautiful.
funnest
Thank you.
conversations ever. Thank you.
Yeah. No,
Thank you.
I just like to know about you, right? Like, because you always ask everybody questions and you always inspire me. I know that when I met you, I wasn't who I am today, and just being able to be in those peer coach or those peer recovery coach sessions, right? And to be able to just learn from you and just to hear your story and to know that our stories aren't exactly the similar or aren't exactly the same, but they're similar in some ways, in some aspects. And to be able to look at you and been like, I can do this too, right? Like I've had some of the same struggles and hardships in my life. And if this person in front of me can make it through all this, then so can I. So you gave me hope. So I just wanted to say thank you for being my first spark to change into who I've always wanted to become, but I've always been scared to. So I just want to say thank you so much.
And before we go, just kind of tell the people who you are and what you're running for, if you will.
Absolutely. My name is Shaena Garberich, and I am currently running for candidate in the 35th district for the state representative position one, which is an amazing opportunity to just even sit here and to just be in that space and to just do all the things that I'm doing. I think back even just a couple years, right? Like 5. My life was so different from what it is today. And I couldn't have accomplished that without the support, without my peers, you know, without that law enforcement officer, Sheriff Sperling here in Mason County, who found me when I was at one of my lowest points and really helped me. And I don't even think he realizes that, right? Helped me become who I am too, right? Gave me that inspiration, when I was down and out and I felt like I had nobody. And the sheriff helped me, right? And that was the days when, talk to the sheriff and we don't deal with the police, right? And going from that to, I want to go talk to the sheriffs. I want to be a part of that conversation. I want to integrate into that and be the change and not the problem anymore.
Yeah. Well, I think it's perfect timing. You're freezing up, so it must be one of our internets. I'm gonna go ahead and it's been an honor and a pleasure. And for the record, and you know this, right? I don't really do politics and I don't work with like politicians per se, but I do work with people,
Right. And people
right?
are politicians.
And people are politicians. Politicians are people, right? So I don't really do the, partisan thing. I don't pick a side, but what I will do is I'll have a conversation with any human being about anything that involves how to make my community better. And I'll listen to them with my discernment at an all-time high, and I'll make a decision and a determination. And that's just what it is with me. I'm more on the ground. I don't want to run a behavioral health agency. I'm not seeking, that type of deal. I like what I do. I like the lane I'm in, and I like connecting with people on the ground, with my own autonomy. I don't like being gate kept out of spaces that I feel like I can have an impact. And so as long as I'm able to, I will be in service to my community. And thank you for popping up and meeting with me. And I'm gonna
Absolutely.
I'm gonna drop this on the YouTube channel and let people get to know a little bit about both of us.
Sounds
So
great.
I
Here we
appreciate you.
go. No, thank you so much for having me and the opportunity.